Welcome everyone. Today we have with us Beria, sir. He is very famous on Value Pickr, a top contributor in Value Pickr. Many of you must have known him. Welcome to the podcast, sir. Sorry, sir. I shouldn't call
I,
him sir.
yeah, I think we had the deal that you have to call me Harsh, and that's
Sure, sure.
how we do it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks, Jay, for inviting me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you give your brief intro, Harsh?
Yeah, I originally come from a town in Bihar called Patna. I so I never had a faintest clue what I wanted to do in life. I had another friend who's also called Harsh, and he always wanted to be an engineer.
Huh.
And I kind of followed him. I was not that bright, but because our names are very similar, Harsh and Harsh, so our serial numbers were just one after another, one after each other. So I used to sit next to him, and he was a super smart kid. Like he always used to solve math books of 2 years ahead. So he was a super smart kid, and I just stuck to him. He shared all his notes with me. That's how my school life kind of went on. And then he wanted to do this thing called IIT. He wanted to be an engineer. So I was like, this guy knows his things very well. So maybe I should just try to do the same. So that's how I got interested into IIT. My parents never wanted actually they never wanted me to go into an IIT. They just wanted me to join the family business. They were
Uh-huh.
like, stay with us. But I did not have a lot of interest in running a business as well at that point of time. So
Uh-huh.
I went through a very common process. Like until 10th, I was a reasonably bright kid.
Uh-huh.
11th, 12th, I did my uh,
Coaching.
school. At the same time, I also did my coaching from the same
Yeah.
place in Patna. And then luckily I cracked IIT. It was not the best rank that I got because I think I got the second session not so right. Like I missed a couple of questions because I was too tired. But anyway, I went into IIT. I had a 5-year degree. So I did my bachelor's and master's from Kharagpur. During my IIT days, like I think in my third year, I went for an internship in Virginia Tech in USA.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
that was the first real research instinct which I had. Before that,
Got
I
it.
also used to work on a few projects with a few professors.
Uh-huh.
But the Virginia State really told me two things. So what I really liked during my IT days was programming and maths.
Yeah.
So the dream for me was to try to work for a big company which values programming and maths.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and what I realized over time was everyone at IIT wants to do that. So I couldn't really create a niche. Basically, I was competing with the top 50 people in India.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So
Correct.
what I wanted to do was like, maybe I should add my skill set to a place which requires more of that. So
Uh-huh.
I did an internship in hydrology. That's the study of water resources.
Okay. That's pretty
So
niche.
how, yeah, and over there, yeah, this might make a few of my colleagues mad, but most people are not from a very scientific, not from a very engineering background. So the
Uh-huh.
math is a bit, yeah, not
Yeah.
so great with a lot of people. So I figured out during my days in Virginia that this was maybe a place where I could actually add value and people would respect me for it rather
Uh-huh.
than trying to
Did you actually
go.
went to Virginia to do the internship?
Yeah, so at that
Uh,
time we never had like virtual stuff, like which is
yeah.
much more common these days. So yeah, I actually went to Virginia to do that. So we have something called a compulsory internship at the end of third year in
Uh-huh.
IITs. You can either do an industrial internship or you can do a research-based internship. I
Uh-huh.
chose for a research-based internship because in my second year I had already done an industrial one, and which I found interesting. So I wanted to see the other side of the town as well. So I went to Virginia, and I liked it so much that at the end of my fourth year, I again went. This time not to US but to Canada, and there I also worked on another research project. And I got so much interested in research that after that I came back to India. During my fifth year, I did a couple of research projects. I published a paper, and I
Uh-huh.
did not sit for jobs because I kind of knew at that point that I research was something which
Correct.
came naturally to me and which I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed. So I just applied for my PhDs. I only applied at one place in Switzerland. And luckily, my professor, she decided to accept me, give me a chance. And since then, so since 2016, I've been living in Switzerland. I finished my PhD a couple of years before in 2020, so during the COVID pandemic. And after that, I moved to my next job, which is, so I'm currently doing my research uh, assistantship. We call it postdoctoral fellowship at ETH-Zurich, which is, so now I'm closer to Zurich. Earlier, I used to live in Lausanne, which is closer to Geneva, so the southern part of Switzerland. Yeah, so for the last 6 years, I've been living in Switzerland doing research on Swiss mountain resources. Apart from that, investing, in terms of investing, I got interested.
Wait, I have a question here, sir. Like,
Sure.
whenever you mention the term research, like what exactly goes behind the research? Like what all the things that a researcher looks at, and what does he figure out in the end paper of the research when he publishes the end paper about explaining what he did in the whole research?
So let's take my current project. Maybe that can give a live example of what I'm trying to do. So
sure.
During my PhD, I was working on a topic which is related to the impact of climate change on water resources. So I was trying to study how climate change impacts rainfall, and then how it impacts rainfall flowing into the rivers. So I was trying to figure out climate change will impact rainfall, and then rainfall impacts the water that we see around us. So how is all this connected in Switzerland? So what the main message that came out of my PhD is, due to climate warming, temperatures go up, we have less snowfall, we have more rainfall, and apparently that's good for groundwater recharge, at least in the part of the world I was working in. So my main conclusion was, due to climate change, Switzerland will have more groundwater recharge over a period of time. So this is time frames of 50 to 100 years that I kind of work on. So I build mathematical models to try to understand this. I test these models by. So there are two core philosophies that go behind any modeling approach. One is a physics-based model where you know the physical processes. So as an example, when there is evaporation happening, we can actually model evaporation by taking into account what was the temperature at that point of time, what was the relative humidity. So a very physics-based approach where we actually know what's happening. And then the second approach is more of a data-driven approach, which is you try to build statistical tools, which can be a machine learning tool, which can be a pure stochastic tool, and then try to connect the variables. So I have been interested in both. So my PhD, I've been doing both. So I develop a lot of data-driven techniques, which we can also call machine learning. But I prefer to call them stochastic tools because, it is stochastics at the end. Like you have a variable which is random over a period of time, and you are trying to understand that variable. And on the second part, you have the physics-based variables. So this is what keeps the scientists happy, that I'm not forgetting my basics. So I try to marry those two worlds. So even currently, I try to do both together to try to see that both my data-driven inferences and my physics should match. That way, I am confident what I'm saying will happen. It's not like some spurious correlations. But anyway, we can go into the topic.
I have another question, sir. Who funds these researchers? Like, how does a researcher basically earn his money? Like, who funds these researchers that are going on?
So currently, my project is a 2-year project, which is funded by ETH-Zurich. So ETH-Zurich has this research program.
But what is ETH-Zurich, sir?
So ETH-Zurich is a university in Switzerland. It's, I think, I think it's the highest ranked university in Europe. It comes in the top 5 or 10. It's one of the Ivy Leagues if we include
in European context.
In global context, I think it's top 5 or 10. So actually, Albert Einstein was a professor here. And there are Nobel Prize winners each year from ETH. But anyway, so ETH is a university, just like in India, we have Delhi University. It's a university. ETH is much more inclined towards engineering degrees. So they give a lot of engineering degrees out. So something similar to IITs in India, where the focus is more on engineering. But in ETH, there's also a lot of focus on science. So applied, so basic research as well as advanced research. So coming back to your question, So ETH has this program where you can apply for a fellowship. Basically, you propose an idea,
Yes.
and then there is a committee which
Uh-huh.
which reads your proposal. Uh, if they like your proposal, they invite you to an interview round where there's a panel of 15 people. Most of these are full-time professors at ETH, and they then ask you questions about your proposal. Basically, they want to know what's going in your head and if you're the right person for the job. And then if they decide that that's the case, which happened to me, they give you the research funding. So my research funding includes my salary, but it also includes some other research money. So for example,
Mm.
money to go to conferences, money to organize
Correct.
field work, money to, yeah, for a lot of research activities, for a lot of laboratory based measurements.
Correct.
So that's how I get my salary.
Wow. Got it. Great.
Uh, so
Another question that I had was, okay, we will rewind a bit. What did happen in the 11th, 12th phase of your life, right? When people go through IIT-JEE journey, right? They like I talked with Sahil Sharma sir, right? He also said that he learned the hardworking skills in those 11th, 12th, which he applied later in his IIT Madras days, where he learned coding by the same hardworking skill that he had learned in 11th, 12th. Was this the same case with you also?
I had a slightly different experience. For me, 11th and 12th was quite easy per se.
Yeah.
And that was mostly because uh, I always, so by fluke of luck, I did not go to FITSI, which is, I think, what Sahil went to.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
went to something called Vidya Mandir classes.
Uh-huh.
And they have a very different philosophy, or they have a slightly different philosophy where they say that you should only do uh, the work which matters. So they don't make you read books at all. They're like, if you are
Oh.
reading books, I remember in my first couple of weeks, I like to read. So I was reading H.C. Verma for physics.
Uh-huh.
I was doing a lot of these book puzzle solvings, and they were like, no, this is not how you crack an. I actually got yelled at for half an hour just for reading an H.C. Verma. They were like,
Wow.
no, that's not how you crack an IIT. Read my modules, uh, do what I tell you to. And
Oh.
at some point, I was like, okay, this guy knows his stuff well. I'll just follow what this guy says. So I had a very focused kind of effort. So I did not go through that phase where I would study 12 hours a day. Uh, it was and I also used to do regular schooling. So I was not in,
Oh. Mhm.
at my time, we had non-attending schools where you could just enroll your name and then not go for 2 years and
Yeah, like
just
dummy
appear for the
schools.
exams. Yeah, the
Correct.
dummy schools. I went for a normal school, so I also had to do like an 8 hour school day, and then
Oh.
I used to have 3 hours of coaching.
Then when did
But
you get time to self-study?
Yeah, mostly, yeah, each day I would study, maybe self-study a couple of hours. It was
Got
never
it.
more than that, but I used a lot of time in my school. I used to get
Uh-huh.
bored in school.
Got it.
That was very, very boring for me.
Same.
So I used to be a last bencher always, because that was the only place where people thought that you were a bad kid, and they just left you where you are. So I was always there, and I just used to read, like do my IIT studies in school. So for me, that's how I studied. But for me, like it was never a very tough because I've heard a lot of people, especially coming from South India, like
Uh-huh.
who study for 16 hours a day. For me, it was a slightly different experience. But it was just, I think I was lucky to get into a system where they taught you how to crack the exam rather than how to learn everything. They were very focused that way. And I always liked that aspect of focus, of what matters, of what moves the needle. So for me, that was kind of my 11th and 12th. But still, there was quite a bit of studying because 8 hours of school, 3 hours of coaching, maybe 2 hours of self-learning. So yeah, 10, 15, 13 hours. So not less, but it was not, I don't look back at it and I'm like, oh, wow, I studied so much. I study more these days than I used to then. That's what I would say.
Fantastic, fantastic. Coming back to your stock market investment journey, how did your interest in stock market begin?
So it was kind of an inopportune time. So after I started my PhD, a few months after that, I lost my father. And he was someone who used to look after our finances. And once
Uh-huh.
he was gone, and it happened abruptly. So I had we had no inkling that this would happen. It was a silent heart attack. It just came out of nowhere. I was in Switzerland, and one morning I got a call from my mother, "You have to come back." And I went back, and I'm like, "Oh shit, we have a business. How do we wrap this?" So it's just that all the money decisions. So I'm a single kid. So in my family, it's only me and my mother, and now my wife. So it was a very small family, and I had to take care of all the finances. So I was like, how? So you have this pool of money. What do I do with it? I had to find.
Does your family business still run, and who runs it right now?
So it ran until 2019, which is when we wrapped it up. So in the beginning, I I ran it for a couple of months, and I kind of created a system so that it could run automatically. My mother just used to go to the shop every now and then to check on, but it was more or less, I could control it from Switzerland. But in 2019, my mother did not really like going to, she had her own life. She is quite a, she likes singing. She used to, she didn't like running the business per se. So she was like, we can just wrap it up. So we kind of wrapped it up in 2019. And by 2020, we were completely out of it. So for me, investing came because of the necessity of making money work more productively.
Fantastic.
And there's also a bit of background. My father used to be a stockbroker in the 1990s. We were IPO shareholders of a lot of very good blue chip companies. So likes of Motherson Sumi, likes of Sun Pharma, likes of Infosys. So my father was a stockbroker, and he used to invest his own money, but he was also used to invest his friends' and money and those kinds of things. And what I've realized over time was my father used to do these very quick turns, like 3x in 1 year, and he would be out of it. And for some of the clients who bought shares from him, so in those days you could not buy shares in your own account. You used to give money to a stockbroker. And the stockbroker would buy it for you and then give the share certificate to you afterwards. So my father used to buy these Infosys and Sun Pharma shares to some people and who I talk with nowadays, and they still own them. And they have done much better just because they never sold it, because they have these physical copies of shares and they were like, it's too hard to sell it. I have to get it dematerialized. But anyway, so that's it kind of ran in the blood a bit, but I was never really interested until I lost my father.
Got it. Then how did you progress to learn the stock market's basics from the scratch? Like you weren't interested in stock market until then, right?
So in 2016-17, like that bull cycle, I saw a lot of euphoria in certain sectors. By nature, I'm kind of a person who is very conservative with money. So I'm not a very bullish kind of a guy. I can paint a good picture, but I generally like to bet where I see a good buck for my money. So for me, like in the early 2 years, in the first 2016-17, like those 2 years, I used to read a lot of books, books or publications which were related to basics of finance. So that was a time when it was a lot of personal finance readings. It was a lot of those basic Graham books. So just like the basics of finance over a period of time. So 2018 was the last peak of the small cap. And in the 2018 to 2020 cycle, I actually learned a lot about stock market just because everything I bought kind of did not go up. It kept on falling for 2-3 years. And I was like, at some point, like, what am I doing wrong? Like I'm following all the philosophy. What's going wrong? And that was like the self-realization phase of how markets behave. And then I also went into a lot of accounting, of how financial accounting is done, the various systems. But most of it, I learned it from open resources. So by Googling or from YouTube. Value Pickr for me was a very late realization. I think I only joined Value Pickr in 2019, late 2019. So, and then I was like, maybe I should have discovered this first because everything is so concisely put. So by the time I joined Value Pickr, I already knew all the basics because I had been doing this on and off for 2-3 years. Value Pickr was like a place where everything was put in a very concise way. So it was a good relearning phase per se.
Fantastic. When did you start contributing to Value Pickr? 2019?
Yes, since I joined, I always used to, because I already used to do so much research for my own stuff. So for me, like
Yeah.
maybe I should also share it because others are sharing it. So why not share it? So I just started sharing it. On that note, I also have a question. How did you get fascinated by the stock market?
So in 2020, right, when I was in 8th class, I think the lockdown happened, right? So I was randomly scrolling through all the blogs about stock market. Then suddenly I got interested in stock market, learned it for 1 year, the basics only. Then in 2021, my father opened a Demat account and I invested through his Demat account because I think the 18 below 18 people can open a minor Demat account, but you can't purchase any stocks there. You can just store the stocks there from a person's Demat account, right? So from his Demat account, I started investing. And then when I started investing, I actually learned more about it than the previous 1 year because I was just trading and not applying anything to it. Right. Then
And does
basically,
this,
yeah.
sorry, go on. Go on.
Then basically learn the fundamental analysis part of it, right? How do you research a company? You know, what is the annual report? I didn't know what is annual report. Then P&L, balance sheet, cash flow statement, all these things I learned the next year when I started investing actually.
And do you have some kind of a family background in this? Like, does your
No,
father or some? So
no,
you
no, no.
kind of learned it completely on your own.
Yeah, exactly. From the internet.
Uh,
Same like you.
and and how is the real like? Do you like it so far?
Fantastic. I just love it.
Really?
Yeah.
Is this something you can think of making a career in, or you are interested in other things as well?
No, I'm pretty much interested in building products around more of things, right? Like I'm
Okay.
pretty interested in entrepreneurship, in finance, basically that kind of thing, right?
Acha. Okay. Go on. I'll keep on asking you questions in the middle.
Yeah. Then what happened after that was I got internship with Vivek Mashrani, right, as a research analyst. There I learned a lot about markets, like a lot about markets. Like when you network with such smart people around you, right, you learn their processes, how does their mind work, how does their research going on, right? There I learned there like just 10x my process of learning in that internship, and I'm still working at there as an internship. Then there I realized that the problems that investors face, right? That there was a problem that in Vivek Mashrani sir's community, right? There was a problem of capex, right? No one always knew of capex happening in a particular company, but it wasn't never organized anywhere, right? Hence, I realized that there is a gap there. We should build a product around it. So that's where I build Shore, which initially started as a capex tracker, now adding a lot of features to it. Right?
Okay.
There I refined my coding skills. There I refined my coding skills and got pretty much deep into coding. Right now I love coding. Like I just code all these days.
And how does this impact your normal life? Like, how much time do you spend on this?
All my day. Like currently summer vacations are going on, so I just wake up at 10 and to 10, right? I work. I love working 10 to 10, and then I sleep at 10, 10:30, 11, something like that.
Okay, if you don't mind, are you an introvert
Uh,
by nature?
it, uh, Introvert, yeah, but if like what happened was that I built cults. Like for example, in ninth, right, when I'm in currently 10th, right? So in ninth, most of what classes are going on, right? So I decided to network with all the bright students, right, who just give the homework to me directly, right? So I networked with them, and to luck, the same students came in my class 10th, right? The class didn't shuffle, right? So the networking with those students I love, right? Networking with some bright students who provide you value, right? Not the ones that just do nothing, right? And talking with them I love, right? But if on the normal basis I'm pretty introvert guy.
Okay, good.
Fantastic, right? Those students pretty helped me with the homework part of it, right? Because like I have only interest in physics and maths, right? That's the only subject that I love. The other subjects I hate, right?
So you want
Because
to like what do you want to choose in 11th?
I think mostly I'll choose science.
Okay.
Yeah,
And do you want to go that engineer? Do you want to go through that engineering route, like IITs or NITs, or do you want to
yeah,
do
yeah,
something else?
yeah. It's the same route, the engineering route, the JE one, JE part route, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this year I will also give the Indian Computing Olympiad. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting because that's what I love, right? Coding, and then it has also some part of logic with it. That those are
Yeah.
those Olympiads I love, right? Not just a particular Olympiad focused on brackets of subjects, right? This should open up a lot of subjects, right? Indian Computing Olympiad brings coding together, then logic together, then some other aspects of DSA, data structure algorithms. That's pretty interesting
Okay.
because
No,
yeah, tell you can tell.
no, I think yeah, that Olympiad is super good, especially if you get a scholarship on that's also very prestigious. So I wish you luck with that.
Yeah. Like for that, I think I have to learn C++ this month. I will start learning C++ after this month, right? So my vacations when they go to, I will start learning C++ and then prepare for it, right, for 4 months. Then there's an exam at December.
So all the current coding you do for your website, is it based in Python? What language are you
Python,
using on the backend? Python.
proper Python.
Okay, so is it like you're using a Django kind of framework, or is it something else?
Yeah. Wait a minute. Yeah. So the framework you were asking, right? What framework Shod is built on, right? So Shod is basically the part that I struggled with was I already knew Python by that end, right? Right. So I was pretty good at Python, but not at the front end, the web development things, right? Because web development, I was pretty like I didn't have interest in web development at all. So there's a site called bubble.io, which is a no-code site where you can build the front end of the site without requiring HTML, C++, and JavaScript, right? So that pretty much intrigued me. And from that, I developed the front end of the show. And then I've made Python code like that so that it automatically sends data to Shod's actual bubble database and it displays it on live basis.
I see.
So the Shod has a feature called corporate announcement feature, right? Where you can see the company filings that companies make. So until I launched, I was all doing it manually. So I was just copying the code. I just ran the code, copied the file, deployed it to Bubble, the bubble.io database, shows database, right? But I realized that by that time there was online school going on, so I had time, right, to do it. But then offline school turned, so it was I couldn't bring my laptop to offline school, right? So I realized there has to be some way I have to automate it, otherwise this can't sustain a lot of time. So then I learned about AWS, Lambda, then the cloud services. How can I connect the databases? Then I learned about MongoDB. Then sort of automated all the stuff, and now everything is on cloud basically. There's nothing in my local machine or whatsoever. Everything runs on cloud on real-time basis.
Yeah, I just try to remember what I was doing during when I was your age. Man, it wasn't this.
No,
It's super good work.
What I learn about what I like about coding is that, for example, if you try to learn a framework, right? For example, if you learn about AWS, right, then you by every new framework that you learn, you realize that how much less you know about programming. You're like, "Pata hi nahi tha, to kya hai? This is something different only." And then you get thousands and thousands of errors until you reach that point where you don't get any errors. I think that I love the most part, where your code runs perfectly without any errors. That's where I reached nirvana.
That's good. So coming back, what were we talking about before we went into this?
we were talking about how did you figure out value picker, right? And how did you started contributing to value picker?
Yeah. So yeah, for me, like yeah, it was just a realization that maybe I should have figured it out, like found value picker earlier, because it's so rich in content, especially very old content. I'm someone who likes reading history a lot. So
Same.
for companies, I also like to go into history. So not history
Same.
of 5 years, but history of 30 years. And there are very few sources in India from which you can learn about history of a companies. One of the best that I found so far is rating reports. So like companies like Care Ratings have historical rating reports going back to 2004. So you can figure a lot about the company, how it's evolved. But the second resource that I found so far
Value
is
picker.
Value Picker, because some people were excited about things in 2010, 2011. So you can read at least one decade of investors' mindset and how it changes over a period of time. So for me, that was a revelation. And I just used to share a lot of my own research about companies that I was following. And I think at some point, Donald from Value Picker contacted me and said, like, we are starting this thing called Collaborator or something. We hit it off like, yeah, I really enjoy talking with Donald because he's someone who has a slightly different thought process than mine. And I always like interacting with people who think very differently. And yeah, I've been contributing now for 2-3 years, and so far it's been good for me. It's just that I still think I learn more than what I give, and the idea is to try to give more than what you learn. Like in research, when we write a paper, our framework is you should review 3 papers for each paper that you publish. So I think there should be something like that in investing as well. For each article which adds value to your investing, you should contribute 3 articles. I don't think I'm at that number yet. In research, yes, but in investing, I'm not sure. But for me, it's been an absolute, yeah, it's very good to get high quality research on Value Picker.
No, that's absolutely true. The one that you talked about history, right? In Value Picker, you just see some companies. The threads are from starting from 2013, 2012, 2011, where you see like the movie flashes around you about the company. What was the thing that wasn't in the company that are right now in the company? What's the company lacking that it has right now? It's just the whole movie form like happens in Value Picker.
Yeah. And also how the company evolved, but also how people's thinking evolved around the company. So that's also something which also tells us, so everything changes with time. It's only people and the thought process that remains constant. Otherwise, everything changes. I'm sure like 10 years after, we'll be using a different platform. We'll be interacting in a different way. Just like 10 years before, we were doing it very differently than what we are doing today. But it's only the thought process which generally stays reasonably similar over a long periods of time. So you can really see that in Value Picker. How did you get attracted to Value Picker?
I basically, I told you, right, 2021, I started investing in the markets, and then I discovered all these sites like Senior, Value Picker, Ticker Tape, all these stock research tools. Then I started diving deep into it. First, I didn't understand the whole how to use Value Picker because the home screen is pretty confusing at the first, where you don't understand where is the forum, right? But then after you start using after 1 month, you get the hang of it, right? This is how you have to interact with people. This is how you put questions. And that moment I started researching about pretty small caps. Like I also love the philosophy of Ayush Mittal sir and Sahil Sharma sir, right? The micro cap, the small cap, micro cap, pretty. I have interest in all those small cap, micro caps, and the research that they have put for small caps like RACL, Geotech, the Shivalik Biometals, the Rosel India, all are pretty fantastic research that they have written. They have done. Right. The one that I remember was that in Shivalik Biometals Value Picker thread, they have also put the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 suppliers of shunt registers. Right. That level of scuttlebutt research is going on in Value Picker that you get to access to. That is pretty fantastic, and that amuses me.
Yeah,
And free, and that's for free. That's for free.
I remember in 20, like, I don't remember, but I read, when you read Kaveri Seeds Value Picker thread, and if you go to 2011 to 13 period, that was the period when a lot of people are very interested in the company. And each season, like, so Kaveri is a very seasonal business where in one quarter they make almost 100% or 90% of their cotton seed sales. And Donald used to go to all the states where Kaveri used to sell their seeds and prepare the reports, like collate how good the season is going and then share it with the public. So it was kind of, yeah, trying to front run the market in some ways by having superior insights by doing very hard work, not by some insider information, but just by doing very hard work. And when you see that, and it's all for free, it's pretty amazing because you cannot, like these kinds of reports which Donald used to produce at those points of time, good institutions will pay top money for those kinds of reports. So it's one of the very few places where you can still find a lot of good work, and anyone can. It's not a community. It's not a closed community where you have to pay. It's free for everyone, and that's And also to stick to that philosophy of never charging for anything. It's pretty unique. At the end, like Donald and the Mitchell family, they actually pay money, right? Because there's so much
Exactly.
traffic in there. They have to pay for the server costs. They have to pay for
Exactly.
the they actually spend
Yeah.
time and money and give it for free
Exactly.
to everyone. So it's yeah, that is super. Not a lot of I don't know a lot of people who can do that.
Exactly. The value picker forum is built on a service called discourse.org, right?
Yeah,
Where you can build forums, right? That costs money. That Donald Francis is bearing. Then Pratyush Mittal sir is working on the tech side of the value picker. That's all free for almost last 10 years. That's pretty hard to maintain. Like
yeah.
some people make it free for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but 10 years maintaining straight for free, not charging any cost. That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and I don't know if I should share this, but I think Donald mentioned that he was getting very top bucks in the beginning, not to make this public, because there was already so much good research going behind it. He could just sell it, and he was always of the
Uh-huh.
philosophy, "No, I won't sell this. This is meant to
Uh,
be free and will always be free."
uh,
So just sticking to that
uh,
core philosophy is something which tells a lot about human character as well.
exactly. Exactly. How has your investment philosophy evolved over time, sir? Like what all the yeah, you can.
Yeah, for me, like I don't have a very firm investing philosophy per se. Like I never
Yeah.
thought that this would be my philosophy. What
Uh-huh.
I want is I'm kind of a bargain hunter. So what I
Okay.
like is to try to get the maximum
Uh,
for what I'm paying, and it can be in a very good industry which has tailwinds for the last couple of decades. Like for in India, I think the longest tailwind has been the information technology, the IT sector. The tailwind is going on for 30 years now. So for me, like it can be betting on that and paying reasonable prices uh, for them. Like I remember in 2017, this sector was out of flavor, and I had pretty heavy bets on HCL Tech and Infosys. And HCL was always cheaper, like it was trading at I don't know 10, 12 times earnings. During COVID
mm-hmm.
fall, even it went to single digit earnings. And this is a Sensex company, which everyone knows, kind of. Uh, so for me, like betting on those sectors kind of makes sense, but also betting on cyclical. So companies which are
Mm.
undergoing a temporary pain, which may be because of company specific factors or industry specific
Uh-huh.
factors. So if you are a steel maker, you will be your financial performance will be in line with the global steel cycles because at the end you're selling a commodity. So for me,
Correct.
making a bet when the cycle is down and everyone is out of the sector
Mm-hmm.
and the company is trading at very, very cheap prices. For example, when I was buying, not in the steel, in the steel sector, when I was buying Martin alloys, which is
Uh-huh.
which makes things which goes into steel mills. It was
Correct.
available for less than cash on its books. This company has very high ROCEs over a cycle, and they had more cash on books than what their market cap hinted. So for me, those kinds of bets also make sense. But then I also bet on secular growth stories where you can buy like the HCLs and Infosys of the world at very, very cheap prices because people go through this cycle like where they love something and then they don't love it, then they again love it, then they don't love it. So for me, like, yeah, I don't have a very firm investment philosophy. The only thing which I have to be sure about is if I'm betting on something which is more cyclical, so where the cash flows are more lumpy, like it goes up 1 year and then it goes down next year. So more
Uh-huh.
cyclical, I want higher returns. That's my only expectation.
Okay.
But if I'm betting on a pure commodity company, I want much higher returns for the return for the money that I'm putting in. Whereas if I'm betting on a company which has reasonably certain cash flows where it doesn't gyrate a lot, the cash flows, then I'm happy paying a little bit more. So that's the only thing. And I generally also have a very comprehensive framework uh, to rank promoters. So how good the people running the company is, and I have very simple uh, ways to judge it. So if you are really good at your job, then you should be doing it better than your competitors. So you should be gaining market share or you should be growing faster than your competitors because if you're really good at your job you should be doing it better than your competitors.
Correct.
So are you gaining market share? The second is if you are really a true visionary, then you should know that the value of multiple cash flow streams. So can you use one cash flow to create another new cash flow, which is not correlated directly with it? So that's the
Got it.
second criteria. Can you create a second cash flow stream or a third cash flow stream and a fourth cash flow stream? And the third is, are you fair to your minorities? Like, do you pay reasonable dividends? Do you shortchange your minority shareholders? And generally, I'm very relaxed with this because I'm not someone who would not buy a company just because the promoters take a lot of salary, because if they're doing a good job, they deserve it. Like, just because it's their company doesn't mean they won't charge salary for. So I have very simple conditions around it. Like, is your dividend payout in line with your peers? And do you use capital in an efficient way, or do you try to use capital in an efficient way? So that's how I judge promoters. So the only two
What
things
all
which
parameters do you what all parameters do you check to see whether promoter is valuing the minority shares, like minority shareholders? Do you look at disclosures they provide or the dividends, right? And as you said, what are
so
the
for me,
parameters you look at?
disclosures is something which less disclosures is in my books is not that bad, because sometimes very small promoters can have, like, their time would be better spent in trying to get more business rather than trying to be more communicative to the investors.
Got it.
As long as they are fair to me in my treatment, so as long as they're giving reasonable dividends, so they don't have to give dividends always. Like, maybe there's a better use of that money. They can put it back in the business, which can earn more money over a period of time. So for me, this is a very fuzzy trait, and I generally tend to be more relaxed. So I can give you two examples, both from the same sector, both in a similar life cycle. One is in Ajanta Pharma, one is in Alembic Pharma. Both are mid-cap.
Wait a minute, sir. Any stock that we discuss in this podcast is not a recommendation, guys. Do your own research before taking any financial decision. Yeah, you can go on, sir.
Yeah, thanks for that. So Ajanta Pharma is, the management over there is such that when it's a huge capex year, when they require a lot of money to build new factories, like they required in 2018, they canceled the dividend. They just said, like, we won't pay dividends because I think there's better usage of money in building my factories. And when the factories were built, when the cash was coming in, they were like, now we don't need this capital, so we won't hold it. So now whatever we have, take it away. Like, so they have been redistributing free cash flows, like, almost completely to their minority shareholders. This I treat as very good treatment of minority shareholders, where they're doing things very well. On the other hand, Alembic Pharma, their dividend payout has also been quite good. They've always maintained kind of a 20% dividend payout, although they also paid dividends when the money could have been better spent in reinvesting in the business rather than raising capital. Or so I would rate both I would, maybe if I had to rate these two, I would rate Ajanta a bit superior in terms of capital allocation. But when I'm making my investing decision, I would not really differentiate a lot between these two, because both are reasonable. Like, it's not that one is super good and one. So if one is slightly better than the other, it's not that action that makes the big difference. What makes the big difference is how the business does. Like, that's a much bigger difference maker. So in Indian markets, I've seen that growth hides a lot of things. Like, if a company grows very well, a lot of people will just forget what the promoters did. So that's also where I try to focus on. If the business is solid and if it's growing very fast, then I sometimes tend to give more leverage to the promoters. So the whole point of me saying this was, I hold equal positions, almost equal allocations in both Ajanta and Alembic, when I could see the difference, not even today, but even 5 years before, when I read history of these two companies. So for me, I'm very relaxed with that. That's my take on promoters.
How do you differentiate? You talked about you invest in cyclical companies also, right? How do you identify whether the trend of the cycle is in the downturn, right, where it's stopped, right? It's at the tank it can be, and when do you decide that it's the top of the cycle, right? When you can sell the company at the cyclicals. How do you identify that? Because it's subjective to each sector, right?
So bottom valuations are generally more consistent over cycles. So if you just if you plot any valuation variable which is mean reverting, so basically in good times it goes up, in bad times it goes down, you will see there's a lot of consistency in lows. So generally companies bottom out at similar valuations, maybe not at similar prices, but at similar valuations. So for me, choosing a company when it's in downturn, it's reasonably easy because first of all, you won't be finding a lot of research on the company because nobody would be covering it. And then days would be bad. Company might be even showing losses. Selling in these cases, I found it's a bit harder, especially sometimes what you think about the cycle can be long laster. So maybe you think that this cycle has done so well for this long, cyclical downturn is coming, and you might be a bit early in selling. So that's a harder problem for me. So identifying cyclical lows is easy. Identifying cyclical highs is harder because sometimes the cycles can long for much longer. So my framework for this has been as long as I get my expected returns, I'm happy with it. I'm not too greedy. So sometimes I'm early in my exits, which is fine for me, especially because I'm very sure that in a few years, there'll be a downturn again and I'll be able to be a buyer rather than a seller. So sometimes selling decision in cyclicals can be a bit wrong, especially if you look from a 3-6 month framework. But if you look at in the broader picture, you cannot go wrong by buying cheap and selling expensive. Yeah, that basic framework works for me so far.
Got it. You are currently staying in Switzerland, right, sir? How difficult is it to research Indian companies when sitting out of India? Is it that difficult, or it's the same as that as researching in India?
So Indian companies. So I also invest globally. For me, there's a lot of research on Indian companies which is available. I would say I have a harder time finding research on global companies rather than Indian companies. So if I was, let's say, in India, I don't think it would make a material difference. There would be one big difference, and that would be if I was in India, I could do scuttlebutt myself. Like I could go to the factory shop floor, meet the people working in the factories, try to meet the promoters, and so on things. But apart from that, it doesn't make much of a difference. Like all the online, you can find most of the information that you require to make sound decisions online. That's not a big deal. Sometimes, you can always miss very small companies where you really need to see what's going on to understand the story. Like the examples you gave in earlier today, like RACL Gear Tech. Identifying that in 2019, you needed to do a bit of legwork to try to see what the promoters are thinking, because you can see that the sales are growing, but there is no improvement in margins. Profitability is kind of stuck, and you're like, what's going on? So you need to do some scuttlebutt or try to meet the promoters or the second line of management to try to see what's actually going on. But in companies which are reasonably large, you already like anything about 5,000 crores of market cap, there'll be enough information available online as well.
Got it. Yeah, you also mentioned that you invest in foreign equities, right? What all equities, foreign countries do you invest in? And how is your philosophy like that, investing in the foreign companies like that? Like,
so it's similar to Indian companies, like investing, it's again trying to buy cheap prices, or if I'm buying very strong growth, then reasonable prices. So framework-wise, it's very similar. What I found is a lot of foreign jobs. So what I invest in so far is Western Europe, USA, Singapore. So mostly English-speaking.
How do you invest in Singapore?
Achha,
is there any brokers for it?
So I use interactive brokers, and they give me access to Singapore scripts. So for me, what is harder for me in some other markets is trying to do research. So something like I was looking at some Polish companies recently, which have been doing very well financially, and also available quite cheap, especially after the Ukraine Russia crisis, because Poland is right next to Ukraine, but growing like crazy, 40% CAGR in sales and 8 times earnings, those kinds of numbers. So for them, like it's a bit harder because then I have to figure out what is the Polish stock exchange where I can get the information. But a lot of these companies, they also make it easy for investors. You can just visit their website, and in the investor relations, you will have most of their filings. So I generally like to read most of the information from the primary source, which is their filing. So what I found harder sometimes, especially in Europe, is that there are so many countries in Europe that each country has its own framework for stocks. Like they have their own stock exchanges. So you have to just be familiar with how countries operate. But if it's a big company, if it's a MNC multinational company, then most of the information will be available on the website. So that makes it easier for me.
Got it. Got it. All my questions are over. Like before this podcast, I had asked on Twitter, right, for the questions about the that I'm hosting you. So there's one question received from Vibhor Vaishya that he's asking. He's asking that how much time does he take for his deep diving before zeroing? He usually attempts to find undervalued ones in same sector. Does he only use financials or study each one by one? Also wanted to give him kudos for describing framework so good on value.
Thanks for that. So the answer is 5 days to 5 years. So for me, like some of my investing decisions has been very quick. So for example, I invested in a company called NALCO, National Aluminium Company of India. Basically makes alumina and aluminum. Very old company, a government-owned company. I invested, I think, in 2020, after March, April, somewhere during that time frame, and I could figure out that they make basically two products. One is alumina, one is aluminum. So what I need is how much alumina they sell, how much aluminum they sell, and what is the realizations, because these are the three things which will make everything which can tell me a lot about the company. So I just went through all the annual reports, collected these numbers, put them in an Excel sheet, and see where the cyclicality came from. And I came to the conclusion that it's going towards a cyclical downturn, and it's available very cheap. So all that took barely less than a week for me to make that decision. The other company which I would like to explain is Symphony. Is one company I've been following for 5-6 years, and I have read everything that they publish. I follow all the interviews. I really like how the promoter thinks, and I still haven't bought the stock. It's been 5-6 years, and I never found them to be at my price. So for me, like research, going top down or bottom up is one part where I get to know a lot about a company or an industry. But unless the price is right for me, I will never pull the plug. So, for example, Symphony I've been following, and as I said, like when I was running my family business, we used to be distributors for Symphony. So we actually saw the demand for the product. It used to vanish like this quickly. Like their products were very high in demand, at least in the 2017 timeframe. It was so much that we actually used to pay advances to Symphony. We never paid advances to any other company. It was only Symphony. So I was fascinated by that. Why is my father paying advances to them, or why my father used to pay? So, but I never found that price to be reasonable. So it's been 6 years. I still haven't found the price to be in my range. Although after 5-6 years of stock down performance, now the price is becoming more attractive than it was 5 years before. So the stock research process, once I get interested in a company, I keep on following it. So like Symphony, I've been following for 5-6 years. I haven't made any decision. For example, Nalco, I followed barely for 10 days and I made a quick decision because I could understand the key variables. So for me, what's important is if I can understand the main variables that move the business. And if I'm able to understand that, then I can value the company. If I cannot do that, there is no point of even valuing the company because then I just don't know what's going on. And this is important, especially in market downturns, because when the stock price goes against me, I find it very hard to justify why I bought it unless I have the thought process in my mind. So yeah, it can go from 5 days to 5 years, and I hope that I finally have. There is a day when I buy Symphony because I know so much about the company. I have never bought any shares of it.
Fantastic, sir. All my questions are over. Sir, do you have any questions for me?
How do you go about your stock picking?
Yeah. So my process, right? Yeah. So basically, my screening process starts from the very bottom. Like I look all the companies. Like my I have my screening criteria as all the companies below 2000 or 1000 market cap, and then I read the screener wikis where if there is anything pretty interesting about the company, I start reading first their investor presentations, then annual reports, right? And if the company still looks pretty interesting to me, then I read its whole value picker thread if their value picker thread exists, right? And if even if it survives at the end of the reading the thread, then I basically end the purchase it. That's the whole philosophy of it.
And do you want to share some of your big winners or big losers? Like not in
Uh-huh.
terms of uh, earning money, but in terms of learning.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So there was a company called Mangalam Organics. I thought that this company is going from cyclical to structure. Although it was a big mistake of me that it didn't went from cyclical to structure. It was cyclical company only, right? That learning that I got from Mangalam Organics. That Sahil Sharma sir also told me that uh, if if a product can be copied, it will be eventually copied, right? There is no mode for that product, right? It is if the company is only making that product, right, and it doesn't have any mode, 5 years down the line there will be a competitor who will be making 10 times better than them, and then their value will be go down, right? They will lose the market share. That I learned from the Mangalam Organics. Then when I just started investing, like the first 10 days, I used to only look at what all are the big players buying, right? I used to copy the portfolio of the big players like Rakesh Jhunjhunwala sir, Ashish Kacholia sir, all these people, right? Then I realized that this was a very big mistake, right? For example, if they are buying 1 crore of worth of shares, but that maybe only is 1% of their portfolio. If I allocated 50%, 20% of my portfolio, that's a big mistake that I realized pretty soon. Just I entered the market, then it has those are learnings that stayed with me. Then also learned that valuation, right? The If you buy at the peak of valuation, even after even after 1 year, even after 6 months, the if you bought at peak valuation, right, it will never go at that valuation again, right? Hence, you have to be pretty cautious about the valuations. That if it is overvalued, we shouldn't average up also, right? We should just stop buying and have comfortable position, right? Because that I had mistake with IEX, right? I bought the like I had accumulated from I have accumulated from February and March of January 2021, right? Then it was pretty cheap. Then I bought at the peak of the cycle also, right? Then because I thought that it would keep going on, but that didn't happen, right? It eventually crashed. That I realized that you shouldn't overpay, because if you pay a lot of at the peak of the valuation, it will never go back again. Like there's no certainty that it will go back again to that valuation. These are the top 3 learning that I learned from last
Just
one
a
year.
just a follow up. Like now, how do you incorporate this in your framework, in your
Yeah,
investing?
yes. Yeah. So all these 3 learnings, right? Whenever all these 3 learning, the mistake that I did, I first of all put them in the framework of a particular stock, right? If I'm studying RECL gear tech, I will look at valuation. Is it pretty comfortable valuation? Am I overpaying it or not? Right. Then I will also look at. I will not look at I have stopped looking at what the big players do, right? That I looked at earlier, right? What has the big person entered this company? I don't look at right now, because that is pretty misleading sometimes. This is how I've incorporated. And then I also look at the cyclical and the secular trends, right? That I mentioned in Mangalam Organics case. Whether this trend is cyclical, structural, or whether it is my misunderstanding, right? That happened in Mangalam Organics. That is how I incorporated it.
And how do you define expensive?
Expensive basically, for me, expensive basically means that if it is trading at what 35-40 p, can it grow around that percentage, right? Can it grow that revenue around that percentage from the next 1 year? If it can't, then I will stop buying it, right? I will not even touch it, right? And if it reaches that multiple where it can grow at that percentage and maintain that p, then I will be pretty comfortable to buy it.
So basically a peg of one, price earnings to growth of one.
Correct.
That's Oh, that's quite good. I really enjoyed listening to your thought. What do you think about like? Do you think this is something you would want to build a career in? So you said like you like building products. You like to be yeah. You like to create new things. So you see a career in like fintech at some point of time, although it's still very early days.
Yeah. Surely, I'll see. I love building that fintech type thing, right? Finance and tech, both the things I love, right? And I love building products from very long. This no code tool that I mentioned, right? Bubble. So earlier to that, when I was in fifth, sixth standard, I used to build these apps, right? I built this book reading app at that time, which is also built on no code tool, right? I didn't know that coding at that time. So what did app did was that so the problem that I faced at that time was I didn't know how much books I've read, right? So basically, I used to read a bunch of books at that time when I was in fifth, sixth standard, and I couldn't keep the count of it, right? It used to because there was a library system, right? You have if you purchase a book, you have to give it again, right? In the library system, then you can take another book, right? Simple like that. So you don't have the authority on the book, so you can count it. So I built this app where you can just scan the front cover of the book and then add it to your library. So I keep the note of where how much books I have read. Right. This I built in 5, 6 standards. So I've loved building products from very long time.
Oh, that's great. I look forward to more things coming from you. This is super. I still don't. I remember in fifth class, I was taught logo, so I was doing left 90, right 70. I don't know if you guys have learned logo in school. In our days, we used to have a graphical interface where you could play with the cursor, like turn it this way, turn it that way. So that was
What
my
is that tool called?
logo, logo,
No,
logo.
no,
We
we
used
didn't
to.
have it.
That was the first thing that I learned, and that was what I was doing. So I was not building any fancy apps.
No. Like our school also doesn't teach us like that, right? They just teach us basic, right? Until 10th also they don't teach anything about coding, right? They will just tell you theories of things, right? Like last year I had this Python course. Like I thought that I will learn Python in school. I was so excited to learn. Then I realized that they aren't teaching Python only. They're just telling the history of Python, who founded Python. Then they will tell you what is the extension of Python until the last time, and I was like, what is this, what am I learning? So I just stopped it and I followed YouTube tutorials. They taught me more.
That's true. YouTube these days teach a lot more. That's true. So I'll pause the meeting now. Uh,
Fantastic.